I've experienced almost everything there is to experience in wrestling. There's very few people that can say that. I put every one of my eggs in the pro wrestling basket.
What was the general feeling about TNA early on?
In no way were we competing with the WWE, but it was becoming a very valid option.
How did the comedy step come to be?
I just leaned all the way in. And the truth is, comedy's always been a part of wrestling.
Winning the TNA World Heavyweight Championship.
It just happened organically.
What went into the decision to leave?
It was time for me to move. I'd always wanted to wrestle in the WWE.
Do you see yourself ending your career in TNA?
That's the hope for me. I've accomplished more than I could ever possibly dream. I'll do it as long as I can because I still love it.
So I was going through my emails yesterday. I was trying to find the email that I sent you in 2003.
Right, yeah.
When I was coming to your wrestling school.
Lifetime ago.
Right? I wanted to train as a pro wrestler, and I sent you an email. You were like half an hour from where I went to college.
Yep.
I was at Wilfrid Laurier University in Waterloo. You were in Cambridge.
Yep.
And I came and I checked it out. Do you remember that day?
I mean, I do remember meeting you, and I remember meeting you at the school, but past that, I don't remember many details.
That one day that I came.
Yep.
I was watching, just, on the sidelines, just kind of watching.
Did the guy break his arm?
The guy broke his arm.
Oh, man. So that's a good
like of all the days that I were to go to your wrestling school.
Good introduction. Yeah. Oh, this is what it's like.
And then I never ended up attending your wrestling school, and you probably thought, oh, it's because
scared him off.
Because that guy broke his arm.
Wow. I remember both things, but I didn't have any idea it was on the same day. Yeah, that's, traumatizing. And it didn't kind of break. It was.
Oh, it was hanging there.
Yeah, it was
like
gross.
this.
It was gross.
I don't remember what the move was. I don't know if you remember that.
They were doing, I believe it was headlock takeovers, and he kept reaching across the guy and putting his arm down. And just before he did it, I said, stop putting your arm over there.
I remember that.
Stop doing that because the guy's going to fall on your arm and break your arm.
Yeah.
And sure enough.
I remember that.
So the rule of the story is listen to what I say.
And then that was like 20 minutes into the practice.
Yep.
And you're like, well, I guess I'm taking to the hospital. So sorry, man, we'll be in touch.
Yeah, I was a child at that point. Like I'm young, but I was like taking care of these kids that were younger than me. So like I felt obligated to take this poor guy to the hospital. So he ended up doing fine. I think he retrained somewhere else and started wrestling independents and stuff. So
needless to say, I did not find that email because it was in my university email account, which obviously I have no access to anymore. But I was like, I wish I could have read you this email and found this. I also thought it was crazy that you would have been like 22 at the time.
No, younger than that. Yeah, I would have been 20 or 21.
With a wrestling school.
Yeah. Which is, I mean, probably not great. I think the wrestling school at that time was more for a place for me to stay sharp. I was kind of cutting down my independent dates. I was kind of only doing independent shows that were good, where I had an opportunity to wrestle somebody that was better than me or just as good as me or whatever it was. So it was more of like a risk and reward. Like I didn't want to work a show in front of 25 people wrestling a guy that was untrained and get hurt, because I was right on the cusp of like signing a deal, right? At least I thought I was, and it was a great way for me to be in a ring 3 times a week. I ended up, having really good success there.
Yeah.
Surrounded like guys that I'm still best friends with today. Crazy Steve, Shawn Spears, Jake O'Reilly. Like these are some of my best friends still today in the world. So I got very lucky. Person to person, we had a really good success rate coming out of that wrestling school. So apparently I kind of knew what I was doing.
What a different scene, though, that was going on in the Ontario wrestling scene at that point versus now.
Yeah, a real hotbed.
Yeah.
And I don't know. There's something in the water in Canada.
Seriously.
We just make really good professional wrestlers. And Ronnie, Shawn Spears, Ty Dillinger, whatever of his aliases you want to call him. And he was one of those guys that he was better than me the first day he was there. You could show him something and he could do it almost instantly. And, full circle, like fast forward, we end up wrestling each other in NXT. Yeah. He worked in the WWE before I did. It's like he's my son, my pro wrestling son. And he did it. Yeah. And he did it faster than I did it. And he's one of the best guys ever and crazy talented. Did you see a path to get there in the early 2000s as a Canadian wanting to do it at the highest level in the U.S.? Yeah, well, it's hard. We've chatted about this on the way over here today, is American people or American wrestlers or people in entertainment in general don't understand the extra added level of difficulty, because coming here and working here without a visa or without being married or without, something is illegal. Yeah. Completely illegal. Yeah. So it makes it so much more difficult than anyone realizes. Like me and Bobby Roode were very close to being hired by the WWE, probably around 2001. We had done, who knows, 20, 25 dark matches and tryout things, and they were interested, but it came down to they were going to hire us, and we came up in a meeting, and they're like, oh, well, they're Canadian. And they're like, oh, well, who else could we? I don't know who the two other guys that they hired were, but it was basically us, but because we were Canadian, they didn't end up signing us. So, yeah, it just adds this really, really difficult layer that most people aren't aware of.
But did it even seem possible to try to chase after that?
Well, my mom and my dad were both very stubborn people, and I come by that very, very honestly. And there was nothing else for me, and I think it could have backfired and been terrible in life. Like I put every one of my eggs in the pro wrestling basket. There was nothing else. I didn't go to school. I had no education. I had a terrible job. I had no other tangible skills to do anything else. Everything in my life from the age of 15 or 16 basically was designed and chosen so I could become a professional wrestler. And to me, that meant signing a contract so I could tell people this is my job. It had nothing to do with being on TV. It really had nothing to do with even making money, which is stupidity. It was just about signing a contract to say, this is my job. This is what I do for a living. I don't have another thing that I do. This is how I feed myself, and this is how I clothe myself and have a home for myself. It didn't matter what level that was, as long as I could. That was the ultimate goal, and I did that in 2004. So, but it didn't really seem obtainable, to be honest. At any one point, even when I got close, it was like maybe this is as close as I ever going to get. So.
But when you're seeing people like Edge and Christian, Val Venus and Test and all of these other Canadians from our area doing this.
You know it's possible.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's this weird brotherhood. Like I can remember, being very good friends with Jay and Adam both, and not knowing, Jericho or Lance or any of the other Canadians, but those guys would kind of look after you when you were there because they knew I was Canadian. So they're aware of the difficulty. They're aware of how good I must be to be in that position, how hard I've worked to be in that position. So they would always kind of check in with you during the day, make sure no one was messing with you or whatever. Because it was, a different era at that point, don't look Steiner in the eyes, he's crazy. And
that was a thing?
Oh, it was a thing. Yeah. You would hear it. And, fast forward 15 years later, I'm very close with Scott Steiner. I'm buddies with him. He's doing jobs to Super Eric on house shows, and we're having the best time of our life. So it's wild. But those guys, I'll never forget that. Like Chris Jericho, even Benoit at the time, which is another topic in itself. But he was a guy that looked after me, and looked after Bobby, and looked after the Canadian guys, because there's this weird kind of unspoken bond there, because they understand how difficult it is.
But if you were so close to getting in with WWE, WCW didn't exist at that time.
No, it's gone.
TNA wasn't what it was. It was, I guess, very early. Yeah. Maybe it didn't exist in 01, but 02.
No, it's starting to become a thing.
It was the pay-per-views, the weekly pay-per-views. If you're not in with WWE and they're not giving you a chance, is it like, this isn't going to happen?
This isn't going to happen. And the truth is even TNA in 2003 didn't even really seem like a, I didn't know what anyone was making, but I didn't think that it would be a place where I could work and make a living full time. They're doing the weekly pay-per-views, Wednesday nights. I think the pay-per-view cost $9.99.
Yeah, I remember.
And they got like Shamrock and all these other people. Like there's no money left there for me or for guys like me. But then started getting kind of, went down and met some people there, and then got booked on one of the pay-per-views and did like a tryout match. And so there was interest in both places at the same time. And I was just trying to keep as many of my options open as I could, because I wanted to do it full time for a living.
There are some things in life that are okay to be a total crapshoot, like trying a new type of milk in your coffee, or checking out the new takeout spot down the road, or a cheap impulse ad buy on Instagram. But finding a new doctor shouldn't be a crapshoot. And with ZocDoc, it's not, because you have more options than you know. ZocDoc is a free app and website where you can search and compare high-quality in-network doctors, choose the right one for your needs, and click to instantly book an appointment. We're talking about in-network appointments with more than 100,000 healthcare providers across every specialty, from mental health to dental health, from eye care to skin care, and so much more. Plus, ZocDoc appointments happen fast, typically within 24 to 72 hours, but like the one I got recently, recently, sometimes you can score a same-day appointment. I use this, and you should too. I just booked my dermatologist using ZocDoc, and don't worry, everything is okay. So stop putting off those doctor's appointments and go to ZocDoc.com/insight to find and book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc.com/insight, ZocDoc.com/insight.
But then how do you work in the US? Back to what we were talking about.
Yeah, it's a wild story, and I don't know if I've ever said this in an interview, to be honest. So I'm going to Nashville and I'm doing independent shows, and I had been backstage at TNA a couple times, and then I got booked on one of the shows, and it was like a 6-man tag, and I can't remember who it was. I want to say it was me. It was they're getting ready to do the World X Cup, but I wasn't on Team Canada. Team Canada hadn't been formed yet, and it was me, Elix Skipper, and Shark Boy were Team USA, which is hilarious, wrestling against, I want to say it was Hector Garza, Abismo Negro, and Heavy Metal, the from Team Mexico. But I'm really bad at remembering those things, but I think that's what it was. So the first time I appeared, I was on Team USA.
That's hilarious.
The very first time I ever appeared. And just kind of as a throwaway thing. But I had met one of the girls. They had like cage dancers, and if you remember that, they had like girls in bikinis dancing in between the matches and sometimes during the entrances. And I met her and we became friends and started hanging out and kind of dating. And, that went on for a couple months, and I'm, wrestling for the WWE and getting across the border, sneaking across the border basically illegally. And I don't even know if I can get in trouble for saying that now, but either way.
I'm sure the statute of limitations.
Yeah, I think we're past.
But this is one of those things where you cross the border and they go, what are you going here for?
What are you going for?
And you're like, I'm going to see some friends.
Yep.
And you're hoping they don't check your trunk and see you have gear in your
what are these
suitcase.
spandex pants for? Me and my friends are in some weird stuff. I know. But so we met each other, and it started as a joke where she was like, well, why don't you just marry me and you can live here at my place, and then you're here, and you don't give them an option to not book you or not use you.
Green card marriage. Yeah.
So that happened.
Wow.
I'm living in Cambridge. I own a house, and me and another guy are the co-owners of this house. I have a good job. I'm running a wrestling school, pretty successful wrestling school, and I walk to Scotiabank. They say there has to be a transaction. My buddy gives me a loonie. We sign the paperwork. He buys the house, my portion of the house from me for $1. I leave my couch, my bed, my dressers, my TVs. I leave everything I own, pack my clothes and my wrestling stuff, drive across the border, sneak across the border. My aunt drives my car, and I sneak across in my mom's car. I get in my car, drive down to Nashville. My mom flies down a couple of days later. We go to the courtroom during my soon-to-be wife's lunch break of her work. We get married, and now I have basically a green card, and I'm living there and living with her, and then like basically 3 weeks after that, I signed my first deal with TNA Wrestling. It was for 4 shows for the World X Cup, but from that day till now, I've never been unemployed.
Man,
yeah,
that's wild.
Yeah, so it's definitely like we talked about it. You said, well, I'm just going to move to LA.
Yeah,
and for me, it was moving to Nashville and making it harder for them to say no. And I took on all that risk and all that financial burden and walked away from everything in my life on the hope, the hope. And I don't think I would have regretted it, even if it didn't work out. I could always go back. My thing was I could always go to college. I could always get another job. I can always get another house. But that kind of an opportunity may not come along again, and I'm not going to miss it.
What was the general feeling about TNA early on?
That it wasn't going to survive. I can remember thinking that when I was, 21, 22 years old. Like it's just not financially, because they're just doing the pay-per-views at this point.
Yeah.
And there's like big name guys on there that are not cheap, right? Like, they're are big ticket guys that are making probably very good money, and they're not going to appear on it unless they're making good money, because those are the rules.
Yeah.
So it's not like Jeff's a friend of mine, so I'm doing him a favor. There was a lot of money being spent and not enough money coming in. And then they get the deal with Dixie Carter coming in and taking it over basically as the CEO. And then the Fox Sports thing starts to happen. So now we're shooting pay-per-views on Wednesday nights in Nashville. And then we're out all night oh, it's, you know, it's 5. We've got to go to the airport, get in a car, somehow get to the airport, fly on a Southwest flight. There'd be 40 of us on the plane, fly to Orlando, land, take a bus to Universal Studios and shoot the Fox Sports show there in Orlando. And at the time, there was very little wrestling in Florida or in Orlando. So I can remember it was Team Canada versus Sanjay Dutt, Chris Sabin, and it might have been Shark Boy. It was me, Bobby, and Petey in a 6-man tag. And Sanjay Dutt gave me like a hip toss, and I took a bump, and the place just came unglued.
For a hip toss.
For a hip toss. And I remember looking at Bobby Roode after the match and saying, man, I hope we can do all the shows here. And we got what we wished for. And then, you know, you're taking bumps on ladders 8 years later, and there's 45 people there, and nobody cares.
Wasn't that the thing about the Impact Zone where it was the same fans coming every week?
Yes.
And it was like, show us something new.
Yes.
Like we've seen this before.
At first, it's amazing
Yeah.
because these people are so plugged into who we are, what the story is, what the product is. And it's the same people.
Because they're super fans.
They're super fans, right? The only super fans are at this weird sound stage and, you know, standing outside in 100-degree weather for 5 hours waiting to come in. But yeah, it was amazing. When we first started there, amazing. And the crowds were amazing. Then like we started doing these weird like, oh, we'll do 2 back-to-back because we can save money by not flying people back and forth all the time. Well, that made sense.
Yeah.
And then, you know, there's times like I can remember spending 8 or 9 days there in a row, you know, living out of a sleep-in and wrestling in front of 145 people. And like, it was wild, you know, wild. And like I saw, you know, the highest of highs there, the lowest of lows. But that was a very exciting time in my life, in my career, because I had finally signed a contract.
Yeah.
I'm doing it full time. I'm working independently all over the United States because TNA was becoming a real, in no way were we competing with the WWE, but it was becoming a very valid option.
Oh, it was a viable number 2.
Yeah.
Especially with WCW and ECW not existing anymore.
Yep.
It's like, if you want to watch something else, well, here it is.
Yeah. And I think
TNA.
they did a really good job of making it completely different, trying not to do what they were doing, because competing with them is stupidity, as you know, Ted Turner found out. You know, there is no competing with them. They were the New York Yankees and we were the Mississippi Mud Hens, and that's okay. We're still playing the same sport, still the same thing, still the same risks, still the same rewards, and then over time it built into this, you know, very legitimate alternative.
Do you remember the first time you saw the 6-sided ring?
Yeah, like I don't remember the day, but I remember seeing it, and I remember being really excited about it, and because for me, at that point, TNA was growing, and we had our hardcore fans, and those people were watching the shows regardless, right? No matter what, we're getting the same numbers every week because diehard wrestling fans, diehard TNA people, they're watching. How a company like this gets to grow is by getting casual people, getting people that only watch the WWE and only know about the WWE to watch this other pro wrestling thing. And if you're flipping channels and you see this 6-sided ring, for an average person, they see a 4-sided ring. They just think it's the WWE, but the ring looks different, right? It's just pro wrestling at that point was a monopoly. It was owned completely by the WWE. So any wrestling on TV was WWE or WWF. So I think having the 6-sided ring, visually, instantly, you know it's something else. And it just, your whole life, it's been 4 sides. And I know in Mexico they had done 6 sides, and I think that's kind of where they adopted the idea from. But the 6 sides was very compelling visually, I thought. The bump was interesting, and Kevin Nash has one of the coolest stories ever. We're doing media. I think me and him are tagging together, and which is wild, right? Like I grew up idolizing this guy. He's the coolest. We're still buddies to this day, and we're on like some country radio show, and oh, you know, we got a house show tonight in Columbia, North Carolina. Come on down, or whatever. And like, Kev, what's it like wrestling inside the 6-sided ring? And he said, well, to be honest, there's just a couple more corners for me to put guys in and give them elbows. And I mean, to this, I can see it in my mind's eye and like hear his voice. And he meant it. And it was just a beautiful thing. He was such a smart guy, got it, was hilarious, has always been amazing to me and taken very good care of me and been a very good friend to me, which is kind of surreal, But I'll never forget that quote.
Were bumps harder in the 6-sided ring?
If you got away from the middle, it could be just because of how it was constructed. The ropes was like running into the wall because they're short, right? They're airplane cable that are tightened with turnbuckles. And now they're not 18 feet long, they're 6 feet. So running into it was like running into the wall. you know, and you get used to it like anything. Some guys really hated it. I never really bothered me. And part of that, I think, is a lot of the six-sided time was I'm doing the comedy stuff. So I'm on vacation. Like I have 9 years of my career where I barely took a bump at all, barely had matches. You know, most of the time I would appear on the show and it wasn't to wrestle, it was to do something else.
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously a very fond time for me and very memorable time for me, but very strange to be making a living as a pro wrestler, but not really wrestling at all.
Do you know if when they rebranded to TNA earlier this year, if there was ever talk of bringing back the six-sided ring?
For sure there is, but they don't. I'm sure they exist somewhere, but then there's this whole other thing, cost to, now you have to have a truck, and this truck has to drive all over the United States hauling this six-sided ring around. When we go to towns, we're using rings that are in and around the area, and then they dress it up to make it look like the TNA ring. The TNA ring looks like the TNA ring, but the ring is never the same ring. It's a different ring in every city that we're in. So there's this whole other cost of having this, because the six-sideds, the only place that had them was TNA. Yeah. And at that point, it was big enough where they had a truck, a ring truck, and it drove from city to city to city to city to where we went. So we would have the truck, or we'd have the six-sided ring. But I don't think that's viable for where TNA is now. And the truth is I don't know if the six-sided rings even exist, so I'd have to have them built.
They've got to be somewhere.
They got to be somewhere. Yeah, I mean the metal anyways is somewhere.
Yeah,
I'm sure. I mean, it'd be an interesting deep dive for somebody to find out.
So did you catch the interview that I did on 6 Feet Under with Mark Calloway? I'm laughing because they referred to Blue Chew as steroids for your, well, you know what I'm talking about here. And while those are their words, not mine, I can't say that I disagree. Blue Chew is a unique online service that delivers the same active ingredients as Viagra, Cialis, and Levitra, but at a fraction of the cost and in a chewable form. And the process is simple. Sign up at BlueChew.com, consult with one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you'll receive your prescription within days. And I think the best part about it is it's all done online, so no going to the doctor, no awkward conversations. Hey, how's everything working down there? No waiting in line at the pharmacy either. The bottom line here is Blue Chew wants to help you. Discover your options at BlueChew.com, and your first month is free when you use our new code CVV. You guys used up the other code, so they had to make a new one for us. The code is CVV, and your first month is free when you use it. You just have to cover the $5 for shipping. That's BlueChew.com. Use my code. The new code is CVV, and your first month is free. You just have to pay $5 for shipping.
How did the comedy stuff even come to be?
So I think we're doing Team Canada. Team Canada's about to break up. You know, it's Scott D'Amore, me, Bobby Roode, Petey Williams, A1, and Johnny Devine at that time. But they've decided it's kind of ran its course, you know, and we're going to split up. And Dutch Mantell is kind of one of the head creative guys there, and I've got a pretty good relationship with him. And he's like, I had this idea that I did with Savio Vega where he gets really paranoid, and the thing in Puerto Rico was where he got addicted to like taking medication, and the medication made him nuts. So like, well, we can't do that on American television, but we want you to be, you're paranoid about it getting fired. You think that this is the end of the road for you. And I'm like, well, how paranoid? And they're like, you're very paranoid. So I just went all the way over the top, you know? And they wanted me to be funny and kind of be wild and goofy and like a lovable loser character is what they were looking for. So that's what I did. You know, pyro goes off. If you've ever been in an arena, when pyro goes off, it's terrifying.
Yeah.
It's so loud and it's hot. So that became a thing when we were still using pyrotechnics. Everyone had them for their entrance, you know, and it would go off and I'd fall down and hold my heart on the ramp and everything I did, I wanted to convince people that I was worried and I was scared. And like I went almost 8 years where I didn't physically lock up with another person. That's initiating contact, right? Trying to explain that to guys that are wrestlers was not ever fun, but it was important to me. Like I couldn't be this person that was paranoid during promos or paranoid during my thing. And then the bell rings and I start power slamming guys. There's a disconnect for me. If I'm scared all the time. When I'm wrestling, when I'm out of the ring, when I'm at home, it's a mental condition. It doesn't just go away because the bell rings, right? I didn't want to be a pro wrestler. I didn't want people to view me as a pro wrestler. I wanted them to view me as their friend or as this person they felt sorry for.
It's interesting, and I don't know if enough people give you credit for this. Your comedy stuff predated Santino.
Yeah.
It predated what R-Truth is doing now and was doing at that time. And I feel like you don't get enough credit for how great you were at that.
Yeah, I obviously enjoyed it. What's funny is I'll do seminars now, and I had never done comedy wrestling a single time, one day before that, ever.
Wow.
I got hired by TNA Wrestling because I was a good wrestler.
Yeah.
Independently, I traveled, all over and wrestled all over and had high profile matches on independent shows and was, a world champion in 10, 12 different companies. And all of a sudden now I'm this guy that doesn't even wrestle and I'm the funny guy on the show. But my advice to people now, and I'm glad I did it. I just leaned all the way into it. The company that was employing me said, this is who we want you to be. So there's no sense of being resistant to that. I'm going to prove that whatever they want me to do, I can do it. I can do it better than they think I can. So I just leaned all the way in. And the truth is like comedy has always been a part of wrestling. That part has always been part of wrestling. A comedy act or a comedy spot. Back in the day it was little people, or sometimes the girls would do funny stuff, or Adrian Adonis he was still a wrestler, but there was like a comedic part, the overtop flamboyancy of who he was. So for me, I loved it, man. I loved doing it, and there was no pressure. And they trusted me. They just said, you'll just show up and just say whatever you want and do whatever you want. So, I had free reign to kind of do anything I wanted all the time. So anytime you see me on TV, there's no script. And oftentimes I wouldn't even think about it. I would just be in the moment and just do what I thought a crazy person would do.
You had some hilarious moments.
Yeah.
Like calling D'Lo Brown CeeLo Green.
Oh yeah, there's millions and millions of views on that.
It was so good.
Millions. That's some of my favorite stuff, is that whole Scott Baio thing, and that happened on not on accident, but there was no plan to it. I was doing a thing where I'm terrible with memory, but I was the TV champion. So I'm like, well, in Eric Young's mind, I'm talking in the third person here, but in Eric Young's mind, crazy, messed up, wild Eric Young, if the TV champion can only defend the TV belt against TV personalities. That's the idea that I had. So we did this thing. Jason Hervey from the Wonder Years is one of the producers and creative guys at the thing. And we had a thing where they're doing like a fake interview, and I come in and I like challenge him. And he's like, Eric, what are you doing? And I'm like slapping my arms and like circling him and stuff, and he doesn't understand what's going on. And then he turns away, and when he turns back to me, I super kick him and I cover him and I count myself. Now I've beat Jason Hervey. And I know that him and Scott Baio are buddies, but just off the top of my head, I look right down the barrel of the camera and I say, "You're next, Baio, you punk," like that, just on a whim. And Jason Hervey gets up from selling or whatever, and he says, "Oh my God, I'll call him right now. Maybe we could do something." And then like 2 weeks later, I'm here in LA, like running down Rodeo Drive in my gimmicks with my tasseled kick pads, and I've got no shirt on. And we go to a golf course, and I jump out of this tree in my underwear on Scott Baio and fight him. It was wild. It's some of my favorite stuff. But the D'Lo one was on my journey to LA, and I come into this convenience store, and he's in there, and I'm convinced that he's CeeLo Green, and there is a resemblance. Right? There's a resemblance there. But yeah, D'Lo was awesome, a great sport about it, and that clip on YouTube has like millions and millions and millions.
Well, you roll him up too.
Yeah. Get a quick victory on my way to LA. It's a warm up match. Yeah, roll him up good too. I did clasp my hands and everything.
You did?
Yeah.
The whole series of you locking up with random people.
Yeah, locking up with fans.
What's the story behind the hitting yourself first?
It's like, you'll see people that are like not wrestling fans. They'll see guys do that. Like from in the 80s, it was a thing that guys did. And I can remember being a kid and being like, making up this story in my head. There was some kind of a weird signal. Like Ric Flair would do it, and like Arn Anderson would do it. All the older guys would do it. And when I was a kid, I was convinced it was some kind of a secret signal. He's communicating to him in some way. And I don't know. I still don't know what it's about, but it was funny, and it was a way for me. People would do it to me. Like during my entrance, I would look, and they'd be like, yeah, like slapping their arms. And it's amazing. Like, I mean, the power of television is whatever you want to be over can be over. You just got to do it.
But then sometimes there's things that get over just because they get over.
100%. Yeah, 100%. The perfect example of that is we're wrestling this is during Team Canada times. I'm wrestling Conan, and I think it's R-Truth. It's me and Bobby Roode. And Conan says, I just did this show in Mexico, and my shoe fell off, and I threw it at the guy, and it got so over, so it's going to be this thing that I do, because he wore Air Force Ones when he wrestled. He went to do a front roll, and his heel got hooked on the bottom rope, and his shoe fell off. And the guy went to the corner, and he just picked it up, and they're like, throw it, and he threw it, and it hit him. So he's like, I'll whip you into the corner, and when you go to the corner, hook your arms and be selling in the corner. I'll take my shoe off, and I'll throw it. I was like, okay, great, yeah, cool, Conan. And I go to the corner, I have my arms like this, and it's like a plastic brick, right? He winds up, and I'm like, what if it hits me in my face? It's the classic Dumb and Dumber line. Like, what if he shot you in the face? But he throws it. It hits me in the chest perfectly. I've taken it over the top rope before. Like, I go into the ropes and hold the ropes, and he throws it and hits me, and I go backwards over the top. Like, I got clotheslined.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, sometimes the coolest stuff in wrestling happens on complete accident.
Do you remember the person coming into TNA that really moved the needle? Because there were some big ones early on.
Yeah.
Christian Cage coming from WWE, and then Angle a year later.
Yeah, I think, the biggest for me, personal wise, is Christian, and he came by choice. Kurt had been released, and him coming probably is an even bigger deal numbers wise and visually. But I think as a wrestler and as knowing the full story of both sides, Christian turned down a deal there to come, right? Because he felt he had a lot more to prove in the ring. He wanted to be the guy, and he's one of the best professional wrestlers ever. And I would challenge anybody that wants to argue with me. As a person that's done it at a very high level for a long time, a guy that shared a ring with him, he's just one of the best. He's one of the best minds for it. And just overall, his body of work is actually incredible. And him betting on himself to come there, making that a thing for other guys. I think partially making that a thing for Kurt and for, later on for Booker T and Rob Van Dam and these other guys that, whether they were under contract or not, they realized when they left the other place, wherever they were, it was an option for them to continue to be on TV, to keep their name in the wrestling world. So yeah, to me, Christian is the biggest, because it was by choice, not by necessity.
Yeah.
So, and that's no slight on Kurt or any of the other guys. Like, I've had to necessarily move to another place too. That's just business. But I think to me, the biggest is Christian because he chose.
The Kurt Angle announcement felt like it came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Like, it felt like it was a legitimate surprise.
He was working for the other company.
Yeah.
Right. And then was released. And then, weeks later, he's in the ring with Joe and headbutts Joe's face into another week, and he's bleeding all over the place. I mean, literally, like, that just happened on a whim. And if you ask Joe, like, he didn't know. And I don't think Kurt knew, but Kurt got so wrapped up in the moment that he headbutted him for real. And you couldn't have written that better.
Yeah.
Right? It made it real, and it made Joe real, and it made TNA real. All in a whatever it was, an 8-minute promo where Kurt barely said anything.
Yeah.
It was real. He made it legitimate. It's a real, we're not competing, but we're an actual valid choice. If you're a pro wrestling fan, this is a real thing going on.
If you look at all of TNA's history, what do you think was the prime of TNA? Yeah,
I want to say it's right in that wheelhouse. Probably 2008 to 2012. That's when it's really rolling. We're doing house shows every weekend. We're going to the UK and doing really good numbers there. It was on, I can't remember, it's Sky or whatever it was. It was on the free channel, right? So TNA in the United Kingdom is massive. At one point, it was out rating the WWE because WWE was on a pay channel. So you had to have like an HBO style channel to watch the WWE. But if you were a wrestling fan, TNA was available to you for free and on any TV in the United Kingdom. And Will Ospreay talks about it. That's what AJ Styles and X Division, that's what made Will Ospreay want to be a wrestler. He's a TNA fan. That's what made him want to get into pro wrestling. And at that time, we're doing really good numbers there, huge houses there. We're wrestling all over North America, house shows Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And live TV is doing well on Spike. It's rating. Actual you know, big names are coming over. They're in the mix. There's a bunch of, you know, homegrown talent like AJ and Joe and Bobby. And, you know, I'm in there. I'm not, you know, at that level yet, but I'm, you know, I'm very involved in what's going on. So very exciting time to be part of it.
Yeah. The roster was stacked at that point in time.
Yeah. Loaded, man. Loaded.
So how do you go from comedy stuff to then winning the TNA World Heavyweight Championship?
Yeah. I mean, for me, like I said, like I was hired there because I was a wrestler. So that's always something that I've been able to do.
And I always remember like your name coming up early on, like you and Tyson Duke specifically.
Yeah.
Were like, these are our guys in Ontario.
Yep.
Like they're going to be doing something somewhere at some point in time.
Yeah. I mean, I think I was definitely one of the top guys in and around Ontario. And in Ontario at that point, it's a hotbed. So like being one of the top guys there meant something. It meant something in the real wrestling world. And I'm kind of wrestling all over North America. I'm wrestling in Pennsylvania and I'm wrestling in Indiana and Michigan. I'm kind of all over the place, you know, kind of building my brand or whatever you want to call it, building my name and building my notoriety throughout, you know, independently. But yeah, going to TNA and becoming the comedy guy was certainly not how I designed it, you know, and is not what I dreamt of being, you know, as a kid. But it, you know, it allowed me to get this TV show. It allowed me to do all these other things. And then transitioning from that and doing kind of a short heel run and then doing like, God, Frontline and doing all these other gimmicks along the way. Kind of made me, once I got to that point where it just kind of happened organically where I'm just kind of a baby face on the show. But I think I'd been there so long and I had so much equity and I'd been a guy that always kind of stuck by the brand and stuck around. And MVPs, like the commissioner, and we cut this promo and he's talking about, I've been here long enough. And I didn't think about what I was going to say. I just listened to what he said. And then I just react how I think somebody who had been there for 12 years would react. And I got mad. You know, like I've earned this. You know, I'm good enough, and I'm going to show the world that I'm a world-class professional wrestler. And in that moment, like it just organically happened, and I was getting really good reactions on all the shows and at all the tapings. Nick Aldis is the world champion. They wanted a baby face to take it off of him, and it just kind of happened. You know, it just kind of happened, and it's one of the coolest memories of my life. 2 months before that, if you would have said that's what's going to happen, I would have said probably not. You know, and that's just how crazy it is.
How vindicating did it feel?
Oh, for sure it's vindicating. Yeah, I mean, I have said this before, and I mean it. If you're in the professional wrestling business and you don't want to be the world champion, then you're either lying or you're in it for the wrong reasons. And in the end, it's a prop. You know, I didn't win anything. Someone said, we want you to carry it. But with that responsibility, that's the drug of this multi-million-dollar company that's airing these shows that millions of people are watching. We're saying, you're the most important piece, and we believe that you can carry interest or hold the fort while we're transitioning to something else. That level of responsibility is something that I've always wanted. And I've known kind of deep in my heart I've always been good enough, but actually getting it and being able to have that feather in your cap is very vindicating.
I'm skipping ahead here for just a second, but what did that win mean versus winning it more recently for the second time?
Well, the first, like you never forget your first, right? That's and at that point, I mean, the second one was strange because it's during COVID, right? So there's no fans in the arena, which is very wild. And at that point, like I'd done lots of other things, and my name was big, and it wasn't a stretch for me to win that world title the second time. I think it was a bit of a stretch the first time. I think there was a lot of people that were resistant to it, and that's okay. Like I'm not embarrassed by that at all. But yeah, the first one was huge, and my mom was still alive, and she was staying at my house, and I didn't even really know I was winning it until I got down to Orlando, and I think I was shooting the end or maybe the start of the second season of Off Your Hook. So I flew home and I had the belt in my bag and she didn't know. And I got a really cool picture of her holding it, you know. I'm going to get emotional. Sorry, man. Her being able to hold it.
Yeah, it's special.
Yeah, very special.
Yeah. Wow. You were the guy in TNA for so long. People associated your name with TNA for so long.
Yeah.
What went into the decision to leave?
I think at the time I kind of had done everything. You know, there wasn't a ton left for me there to accomplish. I'd been the world champion, I've been tag champion, I've been TV champion, global champion,
Knockouts tag.
Knockouts tag. Me and ODB never lost those belts, just so everyone knows. So technically, we're still the champs. Yeah, they took them from us. But yeah, it just obviously, I'd always wanted to wrestle in the WWE. That's my dream. And the opportunity came around, and TNA's people were kind enough to let me kind of finish up my deal there and move on to a different opportunity. And yeah, I mean, had a meeting with Hunter, and it went well, and the rest is kind of history. So it was like fulfilling a lifelong dream was part of it. Also, it was kind of, I think, time for me to move past that. At the time, TNA was certainly declining. We had moved from kind of network to network to network, and it was getting, it was shrinking. And I knew it was kind of a matter of time before bigger opportunities were just going to kind of go away because of the circumstance that the company found itself in at the time. And obviously WWE is not going anywhere. NXT at the time is the hottest brand in pro wrestling. Anyone that says it wasn't watching or wasn't paying attention. It was white hot. And, guys like Shinsuke and Bobby Roode and Adam Cole and FTR, and they made it into this viable, it wasn't an option. It was the number one thing driving the WWE. The other shows were obviously bigger and doing bigger numbers, but the tickets that sold first were TakeOver. They go into a place, they go into New York on WrestleMania weekend. TakeOver Saturday night sold before anything else. They were sold out instantly. It was the hottest brand in pro wrestling. And to be part of that was a massive honor for me. And at that point in my career, very exciting.
Well, when you went there in 2016, so did Bobby Roode.
Yep.
So did AJ. So now you've got three born and bred TNA people going over to WWE, which seems like such a shift there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it was the big game in town for sure, right? They had control of everything. And as they should, they were doing, the best shows. And if you were doing this professionally, that's where you wanted to be. That's where the money was. That's where the fame was. That's where the notoriety was. And that was the end game. That's the top of the mountain. So going there at that time was amazing. And NXT was I never wanted to leave. I loved it. I loved it. I loved the whole thing. SAnitY with, Damo and Wolf and Nikki. Me and Triple H became very close, and I was very hands-on in selecting the music and doing the entrance and how we looked, and I was very involved in all of that. And SAnitY was one of the hottest acts on NXT for those 2 years. So something I'm very, very proud of.
But then they do this weird thing that was going on at that time where they bring you up, but just you.
Yeah.
Even though SAnity's so hot, they just brought you up by yourself, and then it didn't feel like there was much of a plan for you on the main roster.
So, the plan was, it was the three of us and not Nikki, and we didn't like that because she was such an important part of what the group was.
Yeah.
And the first time you see me, it's me by myself, but that's because our debut was supposed to happen on SmackDown. We were supposed to come out, our music was going to hit, and we come out at the end of SmackDown, and we're going to do this thing with New Day. I'm pumped. They're three amazingly talented guys. They're crazy over. They're people. Austin is still a very good buddy of mine. I knew Kofi a little bit and Big E a little bit, but just being around them those couple of weeks, they're just good people, and I know it's going to be amazing to work with them. And the 6-man tag that was in the ring, and I want to say it was Miz, Joe, and someone versus New Day, and it went long. It's live TV, and it went long, and our entrance got cut. And the end of SmackDown is supposed to be us standing at the top of the ramp and our music playing. It goes black. That's huge.
Yeah.
But instead, it's the end of the match. Ding, ding, ding. SmackDown's over because they ran out of time. And just a victim of circumstance. All this weird stuff happens.
Are you standing backstage going, ooh?
I'm standing there in my SAnitY gear, ready. We're literally standing in front of the curtain.
Yeah.
We're waiting for them to count us down and say go.
Yeah.
And they're like, nope, we're cutting it. And it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. But at that point, SAnitY is such a hot group that they'll figure it out. Something else will come along. No big deal. And I think it was maybe a week or two later, we're in a thing with the Usos. Where we wore black tracksuits during one of the breaks, and they hide us under the ring, and we come out from underneath the ring, and we beat them up and get really good heat. And SAnitY was number 2 trending in the world that night. And half of the audience doesn't know who we are because they just are people that watch SmackDown and Raw. They don't really watch NXT. So, but it was still a popular enough group that, we made a pretty good impact. And, the Usos are awesome. I'm pumped to work with both of them. And then we're in a house show before, I think SmackDown is in Ontario here in California. And Shinsuke gets attacked by one of the bomb sniffing dogs during the day. He's in the change room, and this professionally trained dog, like they're going around looking for explosives, and it just attacks him and bites his leg. He has to go to the hospital. So it's supposed to be Shinsuke versus Jeff Hardy. Jeff Hardy's the Intercontinental Champion that night. And they're like, well, someone's got to wrestle Jeff. And I think it was Brian James said, thinking he's doing me a favor. We're still buddies. He's a very good friend of mine. He says, Eric Young's great. He could do it. Well, not fully thinking that through, that means the first time you see Eric Young on television, he's going to get beat. Right. And I think winning and losing has never been super important to me, but there's times when you need to win and times when you need to lose. And when you're first debuting, they're breaking my legs before I can run. Right. I'm getting beat. And there's no shame in beating. I'll lose to Jeff Hardy every night. He's one of the most over wrestlers of all time.
Yeah.
But it was kind of the beginning of the end right away before we even got started. And, I don't really know what happened. Nobody can tell me. The person in charge, we all know who that is. Not allowed to say the name. Just kind of didn't like it, didn't get it. Although it was his choice to bring us up in the first place. But at that point, like, this is what would happen. There's just no rhyme or reason to any of it, and just a victim of circumstance. And the fans liked us. All the boys liked us. The internet, it was a buzz about SAnitY coming up. Everyone liked us. The unfortunate truth is there's one person that didn't get it, and he's the only person that mattered.
And you told me the last time you were on the show, you confronted him. And
sure
you were
did.
like,
yeah, sure did.
What are you doing?
Yeah, sure did. I talked to him like I talk to anybody, and I interrupted. I was told to do it by people there, and I went and interrupted a meeting he was in. We had a very good conversation, and he said, do you have ideas? I said, yep, sure do. Came in the next week, pitched ideas. He was very open to them. It was very complimentary, and thank you for bringing this in, and thank you for showing initiative. And then they sent Damo and Wolf back to NXT, and then I got sent over to Raw, and it got worse. I mean, I didn't do anything. I didn't make him mad. I didn't have a bad match. There's nothing I did. He just decided that I was no good at whatever I was that I was doing. I wasn't doing anything. So I don't know how you come to that decision, but and I've said this before too, is I'm not the first person that he's missed on. Won't be the last, right? Well, hopefully I'm one of the last.
Yeah.
But Kenny Omega was there and didn't last 8 months. So one of the best bell to bell ever in the universe.
Yeah.
And he couldn't survive. So it's frustrating more than anything. I'm not mad about it. I've moved on for sure with my life. I'm very fulfilled, very happy person. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. But it's a very disappointing thing. Yeah, very disappointing.
So when you got released, when the world shut down with the pandemic, it didn't come as a surprise then?
No, I mean, I was making very good money and wasn't going to work. I would have fired me. Like I was well aware it was coming.
Yeah.
I didn't think the group would be that big. Like, I mean, there was guys that were working on TV, like Rusev and a bunch of people. Like, I mean, it was a bloodletting. And I was definitely in that group. I can't remember. Someone put the numbers up. I want to say it was like 125 different guys or whatever it was. It was a lot all at once. So, like I said, like I'm not traveling down to Orlando where they're shooting, the COVID restricted tapings. I'm not talking to anybody. I'm well aware that it's coming. I'm kind of hoping that I'll sneak under the radar somehow, and continue on, but that's not what happened. Got released during that, and Scott D'Amore, who I've been friends with for 30 years, is one of the first people to call me and apologize and say he's really sorry that happened. But, in a week, let me, crunch some numbers and figure some stuff out. Let's talk. I really want you to come to TNA. So that was surely a relief at that point. Because at that point, I've got 90 days. Yeah. And I'm going to be unemployed and maybe making $0.
And it wasn't it like day 91 or 92 was Slammiversary?
Yeah, I think it was day 89.
Okay.
Yeah. So I had talked to some people there in legal, and they said they're not going to worry about it. Yeah. But yeah, I think Slammiversary in front of nobody, where I was like a mystery person in the 5-way for the world title, was I think day 89. So
I was surprised to see you back in TNA because your character had been killed.
Yeah,
you got murdered.
Yeah, I sure did. Yeah, it's happened a couple times. Yeah,
I guess. I don't know. Can anything happen in wrestling? Is that what that is?
Yeah, I think it's the unwritten rules. Is there are no rules, right? And
I watched Cody Deaner stab you.
Well, it's implied. You never actually see it because it's too hard to make it look cool. One, and the truth is the production people there. Eric Tompkins is the head of production in TNA, and he's grossly unknown and underpaid and underappreciated. He's one of the best at what he does. And it's really, that's his vision of being able to keep things open, with no idea that I'm ever going to come back. But I mean, coming back, the whole thing that we shot, like riding the motorcycle, and there's the monologue over top, I got to write that. I wrote every word of it. And there's something like super special about that as a creative person, getting to dictate, you know, not, you know, when I win and when I lose and when I, you know, but being part of that process. It's a drug. Like, it's just a drug that can't be bought. And having that responsibility, or having that trust, you know, the respect of, there should really be someone professionally doing it, but them saying, well, like, give it a try. And then I wrote it like, no, it's actually perfect. So like word for word, I wrote all of that. I wrote, you know, the TNA thing when Scott got let go, and the rah-rah, those are all my words, and it's real to me, you know. It's something that I really enjoy. I wouldn't say that I'm a writer, but I really like doing it. So coming back, and I didn't really want to leave in the first place, to be honest, but it just was the opportunity to go up there and be there and do something special with, the idea that was proposed to me was just a thing I couldn't turn down. But coming back was coming home, and like I said, I'm a big believer in fate. I have it tattooed on the inside of my arm, and I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Exactly.
And didn't you briefly go back to WWE after being released?
Yeah. So the video where I am not dead and come alive, and that's after me. That's me coming back the first time. And yeah, I went, so I was employed by them for, I think, 8 or 9 months.
People don't know this because you weren't on TV.
Yeah, some people know, but I think the majority of the world don't understand, because I would never showed up at TV. The truth is, I never left my house. So yeah, I was proposed a gimmick to work there with 2 guys, and was super excited about it. And then that didn't happen, and one of them was Bray, and then Bray passed away. Which sucked and is unfair in every way possible. So then it's like, well, you know, pitch some new ideas. And then the person I worked for before forced his way back in. And I just kind of said, there's a lot of reasons where I didn't want to work there at that point. But the number one reason was I don't want to work for a person like that, you know. And this is long before all the other stuff had come out. But I was pretty convinced I knew who he was and how he was. And most professionally, but more importantly for me, morally, I just can't work for a human being like that. So I asked for my release and was granted it. And I'm not saying any of the stuff because I had to sign an NDA. And so, yeah, it's a whole weird thing.
Does this mean you would have been part of an early iteration of the Wyatt Sicks?
Yeah, I think the original idea was me, Bray, and Bo as a trio. That's what was told to me from Hunter, basically. Yeah. And so, you know, obviously I'm going to jump at that. You know, I'm friends with both of those guys. It would have been, creatively would have been just an unbelievable opportunity, working there, working on the main roster, you know, wrestling all over the world with 2 guys that I get along with well. And obviously a huge part of the show at that point, you know, like The Fiend and Bray coming back was one of the most popular things at that time, one of the most viewed thing. Like, they'd put up those viral videos, and they'd be viewed within 6 hours by millions of people. So being part of that was very appetizing. Yeah. And it's kind of not in my wheelhouse, but close enough to my wheelhouse where I would have really enjoyed it. And it would have been challenging, but in like a really cool way. So I was obviously very excited. And then all the stuff happened with the sale and all this other weird stuff. And all of a sudden I wasn't working for the person who hired me. And I wasn't willing to do that, and I don't regret it, not at all. And I think it's the coolest. For me, it's not lost to me that I was able to walk away from money like that, you know, stability like that, because of what I beliefs of the kind of human being that I am. And that's not like 10 years ago. I don't know if I would have been able to make that choice financially or personally, or certainly not professionally. And I'm in a position where I'll be fine. I'll figure it out. And I hadn't even talked to Scott at the time or TNA.
About going back to TNA?
We had 0 conversations about it. I just knew I wasn't going to work for the WWE anymore. So it's a wild one. Yeah. You know, but the truth is it was 100% my choice. I think there'll be a lot of people that think that's stupid. A lot of people that won't make that choice. But I think for me in my career, I think it's one of the proudest things I've ever done, to be honest.
It seems like a lot of the success that TNA is having now can be attributed to Scott D'Amore and the vision that he had.
Yeah, no doubt.
So then how surprising was it when he got fired?
I mean, so I was one of a few people that kind of knew the rumblings, and kind of had to keep that to myself, and no one else really knew it was coming. So didn't like that. I don't like holding stuff from people, but it's none of my business. You know, that's not my information to share. Even though I knew it was happening kind of in the works. And when I first got heard about it, I was like, that can't be, right? This place exists because of the work that he's done. You know, this place was dead almost. You know, it was on life support. And Scott's work and his vision and his undying belief that it can be a real thing is the reason it is where it is now. And I think even the people that run it now would agree with that. In the end, I just think it's business. And, you know, one guy got into an argument with another guy and one guy lost. And it's kind of really as simple as that. And I'm sure there's a lot more to it. I'm not privy to those things. To be honest, I don't want to know those things. Scott's been a very good friend of mine, will continue to be. I had 40 people at my wedding in Las Vegas, and he was one of those 40. I've been close with him for 30 years. I've known him since I was 16 years old, and he's done a lot for me, and I've done a lot for him, and I will continue to do that. But it was very surprising, man, and there was obviously a meltdown in the locker room, and some of these people there have never wrestled, never worked for anyone else. He's been their only boss. He's the only person they've ever went to when they've had a question, ever went to for advice, right? He's been their only boss. So all of a sudden, this is my 10th or 12th time the guard has changed for me working there. So it was, I've gone through it before, and I'm sure it will happen again because it is just business in the end, and everything changes. And in the entertainment world, the turnover can be lightning fast. You know, you can be working for one place for a certain amount of people, and 2 weeks later, those people are all fired, and now you're working for a completely new set of people. It's a wild world. Yeah. You know, it's a wild world. And I wish it never happened. You know, I wish Scott still worked there, but that's not the reality. I wish my voice didn't sound like this. I wish my mom didn't die from cancer. Those are things I can't control. And I try not to dwell on it. I only can just move forward, respect the past, and respect what he did, and I always will. Scott could call me right now and say I'm in trouble. I would leave right from here to the airport and fly to wherever he is and help him any time of day, night. Doesn't matter what I'm in the middle of. He's one of my very, very close friends and has helped me a ton. I'm probably not sitting here talking to you without Scott D'Amore, and that's the truth. So it's unfortunate for sure, but everyone else is just trying to move on. And the truth is it's still doing very well. Yeah.
Since you brought it up, why does your voice sound like this?
Okay, yeah. So I just had last Thursday my 30th throat surgery since 2004. I woke up, I'm living in Nashville at the time, married to that girl, living at her house, and my voice was scratchy. I'm wrestling for TNA at the time, Team Canada, and I go to like a walk-in clinic. I'm Canadian, so I'm new to the American healthcare system.
Yeah, isn't that funny?
Good job, everyone. It's terrible. And so I'm new to it, having to have insurance and pay for it and, you know, all this other stuff. So I've applied for Blue Cross Blue Shield, I think it is. And so I go to this walk-in clinic and I say, I don't know, there's something wrong with my voice. I'm losing my voice. And he's, you know, do this and do that. He goes, yeah, I don't know. And I'm thinking I have laryngitis. And he says, no, you definitely don't have laryngitis, but there's something wrong with your throat. You're gonna have to go to a throat specialist. Yeah. So 3 or 4 weeks later, I go to a throat specialist. And they go in like through my nose with this like camera, and which is very comfortable and
I'm sure
relaxing. Yeah. And he's like, try not to swallow the camera. I was like, okay. And he's like, oh, you have this thing called papillomas. They're basically nodules or warts that grow in your vocal cords. And it's like a common cold, like a virus. Like you have it, I have it, everyone has it. But only certain people it becomes aggressive. And in my case, in 2004, it became aggressive. And they go in, they'll remove them. And then sometimes you have one and they don't come back. Or in my case, I've had 30 since 2004. Brian Pillman had it. I don't know the numbers, but I heard when he passed, he had 136 surgeries on his throat from when he started getting it. And I don't know how true that is, but that was the number I heard. At this point, I do it about once a year. Obviously, I mean, it could be worse. It could be cancer, something that they couldn't correct. Or
are you not able to talk after these surgeries?
No, I mean, usually it's always different. It just depends on how much there is and how much they have to remove. So it's to the level of damage. The the truth is like I kind of like that my voice sounds like this.
I mean, you sound like a wrestler. That's
they can close their person listening can close their eyes and know it's me talking, right? It's very distinct.
That's true.
I'm not going to win any singing competitions. I'm not going to be a diabolical front man for a rock and roll band anytime soon. But it is a distinct thing. And the truth is that I sound like a pro wrestler.
You sure do.
So I'd already been a pro wrestler for 8 years before my voice started to sound like this. So I guess I just kind of grew into it, I guess, professionally.
It sounds almost like Steve-O. I don't know if Steve-O has the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder if he does. And I mean, I grew up watching, CKY and Jackass and that stuff, and his voice is very similar. Obviously, if you listen to Brian Pillman talk, it's different because his voice is different. My voice was always kind of deep and raspy, but nothing like this.
Is this like Macho Man?
Yeah, I don't think he had it. I think his just kind of sounded like that. And I've heard, and I don't know how true that is. I've heard that his speaking voice was kind of a work.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that he didn't sound way off, but like how he spoke in promos where it was real like this was put on.
Huh.
Yeah.
I heard a story where someone was like, if you keep doing that with your voice, you're not going to be able to speak. He's like, doing what with my voice?
Right.
Like that was his voice.
And it could be, yeah. I mean, it's an old wives' tale or an urban myth?
I don't know.
But yeah, I've heard both. So mine sounds like this. I'll go I'll meet people at signings and stuff. They're like, oh, you really do sound like that. I was like, yeah. 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Oh, or you go into a store and I'm buying a candy bar, like, oh my God, are you sick? And I'm like, I wish I wish I was sick. No, this is just how my voice sounds all the time.
What happened to your ear recently?
Oh yeah,
it almost fell off.
No, yeah. So I'm not great on social media, but there was all this stuff like it had to be reattached and all this stuff. It was obviously very serious. I had a huge cut on the back of my ear from a table spot I did with Frankie, and totally my fault. And I'm doing the Spanish Fly, and I know when he does it, he kind of goes sideways a bit, kind of turns to one side. And in my head, he went this way, but he actually doesn't. He goes this way, and I'm going this way, and he's going that way. And I ended up busting the table with my head. I mean, really, I probably should be dead. If you watch the clip, maybe you could pick it up and put it on here. I really should be dead. And as soon as I hit, you can just see the blood just stream down. So the internet does what the internet does, and his ear got ripped off. And I'm like, oh man, that sounds awesome. That sounds super cool. I'm not going to correct them. I'm just going to let them say whatever they want. Because the truth is whatever they say is always going to be cooler than the truth.
Sure.
So yeah,
and never let the truth get in the way of a good story.
That's it. That's the rule. I'm never going to let truth get in the way of a good story. And the story was that I had to have my ear reattached. It definitely, I think it was 8 stitches behind my ear, but it was just bleeding nonstop because of where it was. So
just like a thin area.
Yes,
I got it.
Just where it was just bleeding, and they glued it, and it just kept bleeding. So I had to go to get stitches. Saturday night, Las Vegas, Sunrise or something. There's a hospital. It's like right downtown. It's an interesting place on a Saturday night.
I bet they see some stuff.
I mean, I got in quick. I had a towel, and it was like purple with blood. Like it was just gushing blood. So I went in pretty quick. I mean, I was, as a Canadian, you'll respect this. I went into an emergency room and had stitches on a Saturday night in Las Vegas and was out in 45 minutes.
Oh, man.
So I'd still be in the waiting room.
I think the quickest I've ever been in the ER in Canada is like 10 hours.
Right. Yeah, it's brutal. Yeah. It's brutal. So,
going back to the point we were making earlier, both of them have their pros and cons.
Yes.
The American healthcare system and the Canadian healthcare system.
I think somewhere in between would be a real excellent system. I don't pretend to know anything about it, but
me neither.
Canadians want to say that we don't pay for it. Well, I have some property on the moon. So yeah, if that's what you truly believe. And Americans pay way too much. You know, and there's no regulation to any of it. It's insane. It's insane. So, but there's nothing I can do about it. The lady, Dr. Galen Garrett, is one of the foremost professionals. People fly from all over the world to Vanderbilt Voice Center in Nashville, Tennessee, to have this woman perform the surgery. And I'm lucky enough that I live there. She's in my backyard. I've known this woman for 20 years, and she's the one that's done every single one of my surgeries. I'm still alive. She hasn't killed me yet, so I'll just keep going.
You ever wonder after getting one of those voice surgeries that you're going to wake up and you're going to, hi, my voice is like this now?
Yeah, I pray that never happens. And it's always a bit different. You probably can't hear the difference, but I can always hear the difference. Yeah. It's it'll be a little bit deeper or a little bit more raspy, just kind of depending on where it grows on your vocal cords. I'm lucky it could grow into my windpipe. Then my career would probably be over because I wouldn't be able to breathe. So it could be way worse. If I never get them again and I never go back, I always say that, oh, how we doing today? And it's great, good to see you again. I was like, well, I'm not going to lie and say it's not good to see you. Yeah. I hope to never see those people again in my life. But the truth is, probably around this time next year, I'll be back in the hospital. Yeah.
You've got so much exciting stuff going on outside of wrestling, but do you think about how much longer you can wrestle?
Yeah, for me, when I was young, when I first started, I started when I was 17. And I've always said, if I can do it and do it at a high level, I'll continue to do it. I love doing it still. You know, the problem is the part I love is the shortest part of my day. And that's wrestling in the ring. It's all the other stuff. It's living out of a suitcase and getting on a plane and being crammed in a thing and not sleeping and being pulled in a million directions. And I'm really done with most of that stuff. And I've earned a spot in, you know, in the world where I don't have to deal with too much that's irritating. But I can keep up with anybody. And I think I'm still very good at it. And the minute that I think I can't keep up, or someone has to carry me, or it really hurts me, or I don't get excited to do it, I'll quit. I'll quit right there on the spot. No matter how much money I'm making, no matter where I'm working, I'll quit because I love it and respect it too much. I'm not going to be the guy at 65 and, you know, some young person is carrying me through a match, or, you know, we can't do that and we can't do this because it hurts, or I won't be able to stand up or whatever. I'm not doing that. You know, I'm taking up, at that point, I'm just taking up space, and it's unfair. And I definitely want to retire. You know, I want to not have to do this at some point. My plan is, you know, maybe another 4 or 5 years. I think I'm a bit of an anomaly. At 44, I'll be 45 in December, and I don't think my wrestling today is much different than it was 15 years ago. I'm certainly not the athlete I was 10 or 15 years ago, but I'm 10 times the pro wrestler I was. I can solicit more of a reaction and do things with greater ease than I could at that point because of the experience, and there's just no replacing it. You know, I've been doing it a long time. And I think I'm in an original or really interesting place because I've seen the card from every angle, right? I've been the opening match. I've been the main event. I've been the X Division champ. I've been the tag champ. I've been the women's tag. I was wrestling women before it was a cool thing. I wasn't even allowed to touch them, so, you know, and some of those matches I'm super proud of. I mean, Jess, ODB, had to do all the work, but because I wasn't physically allowed to, couldn't lock up with him. You got a 15-minute pay-per-view match with Gail Kim and Madison Rayne, and it's you and ODB. As 1/4 of the combatants, I'm not allowed to touch anybody. Yeah. And no one said that was terrible. Yeah. People didn't write emails to TNA saying, I never want to see that on a pay-per-view again. That's a compliment. It wasn't certainly the best match on the show. It certainly wasn't the favorite match I've ever had, but I'm very proud of people didn't say it was terrible. A lot of that stuff people love. The whole thing with me and ODB and me wrestling the girls on the show. It was the thing that I loved doing. It was super fun. Most of them were super over, made my job super easy. But a lot of the constraints people didn't understand. I wasn't even allowed to like back them into a corner because it was too aggressive for Spike TV. So it was a very interesting time in my life. But yeah, for me, like I've experienced almost everything there is to experience in wrestling. I've been the funny guy. I've been the psycho. I've been the regular, you know, just kind of vanilla, whatever, you know, and there's very few people that can say that. And that's not, I'm not the best wrestler. I'm not the best talker. I'm not the best funny guy. I'm not the best crazy person, but I've been able to be very good at all of it. And it allowed me to experience all kinds of things that, like some guys that are very good at one thing, they only just do that one thing for 30 years. And there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. Right? Ricky the Dragon Steamboat was Ricky the Dragon Steamboat every day, all day, every year that he wrestled. He was the same gimmick, he did the same things, looked the same way. And there's something very proud to say, like it's a hell of a run. He's one of the best to ever do it. Yeah. But he did one thing his entire career. Yeah. I've done 30 different things, and I'm not done yet. So it's really cool. And I think it gives me an understanding of wrestling that very few people have.
Do you see yourself ending your career in TNA?
I do. Yeah. Yeah. That's the hope for me. We talked on the way over. I come from a town, population of 70 people from rural Ontario, Canada. I was promised there would be no math today. The percentage chance of me sitting here talking to you about all these things I've done in wrestling and had these TV shows and I've done all this stuff, it's less than 5%.
Oh, it's got to be way lower than that.
It's probably lower than that. The truth is, being a Canadian, it might even be negative, you know? So I've accomplished more than I could ever possibly dream. Pro wrestling has given me this amazing life. I've wrestled all over the world. I've wrestled in 40 different countries. I've been paid to do it. I've seen things that I never thought I'd see. I've done things I never thought I'd done. I've been a world champion twice. I've held 8 different world tag titles. I've won NXT tag titles, match of the year, performer of the year. Like I've done everything that I ever thought it was. I had one goal, and that was to sign a contract to say I did this for a living. I did that in 2005. Everything past that has just been the cherry on top. And I'll do it as long as I can because I still love it. You know, I still love it, and it's given me this amazing life. But yeah, it's less than 5% chance that I'm living my dream, and as cheesy as that sounds. And that's not lost on me. I'm very, very lucky.
Well, look at the opportunities it's given you outside of wrestling.
Yep.
So your TV show Vinyl Obsession now on season 2.
Yep.
Congrats on that. You know, getting renewed for another season.
Yeah, yeah. It's weird to think. Like I think doing TV shows, and I still would love to try my hand at some acting and stuff. But it was never something that I pursued because I was too busy pursuing wrestling. So I think it was something I was always interested in. And the fishing show just kind of fell in my lap. And
I was so jealous of that, by the way.
We did have this discussion today.
I'm a big fisherman myself.
Yeah.
When you got that show, obviously it's very happy for you, but I'm like, I want a show like that.
Yeah. It's a wild story. And this is a classic thing is treat people how you want to be treated.
Yeah.
And be interested in everyone. And I've been like that my whole life. And I think you would have to, this is going to sound conceited, but I think you'd have to fucking search pretty high and hard to find somebody that doesn't get along with me or doesn't have something kind to say. Because I treat people how I want to be treated. Everybody. And I was friends with Jess Ward. Jess Ward was one of the production people at TNA. She's now married to Tommaso Ciampa. She was on the first Tough Enough. If you watch the first Tough Enough, you'll remember her distinctly. She was taking horse bumps over the person that was down on all fours and like fell on her head and really hurt herself.
Yeah.
That's Jess Ward. She took production and film and stuff in college, and we were very good friends at TNA and hung out a lot, talked a lot. We're still very good friends to this day. Never dated or never anything like that. Just this person that I really liked talking to and was very good friends with. She did some projects for her film school, and I was like a detective in one of them. And I played a role in a funny person in a music video that she shot for a project. Then when she left TNA, she started in the television world. She worked on Big Brother. She worked on Real World. She worked on a bunch of reality shows. And she met this guy, Dan Bree. Dan Bree is the guy that came up for the concept of the show, Off the Hook Extreme Catches. They worked on a show together called Sliced, where they would cut things in half.
Oh, yeah.
You remember that? It was on like Discovery or something, maybe History. And they would, let's a 747, we'll cut it in half. Yeah. So kind of a weird show, but it was a show, and they worked on it together and became friends. They initially, Discovery or Animal Planet, cast a professional fisherman. I don't know who it was, but some guy that did it professionally as a professional fisherman, had like a outdoor network show or something at one point. They cast him to be the host. And they did the sizzle reel, which is a short miniature version of what an episode would be like. And all the people eternally didn't like it. He's so busy talking about braided line and what lures he's going to use. And they're trying to make this appealing to the masses. So they put a thing up on like a message board saying, we're looking for a host, has to be good with physical comedy, has to be comfortable in front of the camera. And Jess read it. I don't have access to that stuff. Jess Ward read it and said, we probably hadn't talked at that point in 6 or 8 months. And she just kind of texted me out of nowhere and said, hey, a friend of mine's got this show about fishing, and I think you'd be perfect for it. Do you mind if I throw your name in the hat to audition? And I said, yes. I'm certainly not going to get it, right? And like 3 days later, this Dan Bree calls me. I've been watching your videos on YouTube, the one where I roll up D'Lo in the thing and I fight Scott Baio in LA. I think you're hilarious. I would love for you to be the host of this show, but there's a process to it. So, this goes on time. Dan, I'm wrestling full time. I'm wrestling house shows. I'm wrestling indies. I'm literally working full time. And he's calling me like every couple of days. It's down to 50. It's down to 25. It's like, just dude, don't stop calling me. I'd love to do it, and if I don't get it, it's no problem. Yeah. And if I do, cool. You don't have to update me until it's over. And I was in New York actually with my wife doing something. I don't remember what it was. Visiting my cousins. My cousins live in Brooklyn, and I got a call from Dan, and he said, "It's yours. You got the job." And we went out. We shot a sizzle reel. It went around eternally. And at this point, I know nothing about TV. I still really don't, but I know nothing about it. Right, it's a completely different world than the wrestling world. So we do the sizzle reel, and it gets passed around eternally throughout Discovery, and everyone loves it. And right away, it gets greenlit for 12 episodes, which is rare for a debuting show. A debuting show is typically 6 to 8, but right away 12. And we go right from shooting This Is Real to like 3 weeks later, we're straight out shooting the first episode. And it was 12 episodes. We were still shooting the first season when it started airing. And it started airing, and the numbers came back and were crazy. They were hoping it to be really good in the male demographic. The truth was, it was kind of universally loved by everybody. So it was very surprising to them. There was actually a huge female audience watching the show at the time, and they renewed it while we were still shooting the end of the first season for 12 more episodes for season 2. And it did very well. I was telling you on the way over here, like I was kind of the chosen one at Animal Planet. I'm standing on stage with Oprah Winfrey and the CEO of Discovery at Upfronts, which is a big deal. You know, I'm hanging out with Morgan Freeman. He did the voiceover for the Science Network, and he's backstage, and we're chit-chatting, and I'm like, my life is insane. You know, I'm drinking whiskey with Jeremy Wade, the River Monster show, and just I'm drinking at the bar and eating with Harold and Kumar because they had a special that was coming on Discovery, and like all this happened in a span of 6 months. You know, and all of a sudden I'm on ESPN, and I'm on Fox and Friends. I'm on Good Morning America. I'm a real celebrity. You know, an actual celebrity. And my contract came up at TNA at the time, and I was able to renegotiate and make my first real money ever. And I owed a lot. And it was very well received, and the show did well. And we kind of ran out of stuff to do in North America. Like the first show that ever aired, you catch a shark from a paddleboard. There's nowhere to go. You're right. So we did 24 episodes in and around North America. And then it was a discussion of we want to continue doing the show, but we ran out of things to do. So we could still do Off the Hook, but we'll have to go to like Australia or Africa or someplace and be there for months. And I said, I'm willing to do that, but you're going to have to increase the pay because I'm going to have to quit wrestling, which I don't want to do. I mean, in the end, that's maybe the smartest thing I ever did because, you know, you fast forward 6 months later, I go from standing on stage with Oprah Winfrey to being unemployed at Discovery in Animal Planet. They did another show called No Limits, which I thought was another great show, and it just didn't do well. They put it on a weird time and a weird date, and it just didn't get the viewership, and they ended up not even airing them all. I think they aired 6 of the 12, but it was a very good show, a show I was very proud of. And then like all of a sudden, I went from being the chosen one to basically being unemployed by them in almost overnight.
But now fast forward 10 years later, you've got this other show.
Yeah. In between, I told you I shot a pilot series for Travel Channel, and it never ever aired. There's a whole bunch of weird stuff. A bunch of people got fired, and it wasn't one of their shows, so they moved forward in a different direction. So that show never aired. But somewhere out there's a whole 60-minute show about the Fountain of Youth, starring me, where I dove in a freshwater cave, and we flew to Bimini, and I was hand feeding hammerhead sharks and all this wild stuff. But yeah, and I went back to TNA and had approached them, pitched an idea that I had about a vinyl show. I'm a crazy vinyl collector. I have over 2,000 albums at my house. I've only been collecting them for about 9 years. So it grew quick. And music has always been a massive part of my life. And it's neat to me because now I'm working on this music show. I'm clearly not a singer. We've discussed this already. I can't play an instrument. I can't write music. I can't read music. I know nothing about it. But what I know, and I think is the most important thing, is that I'm in love with it. I'm in absolute love with music and musicians and the story of it and lyrics and sound and how it all comes together. I love it. And they already had the show Vinyl Obsession, where they'll bring in professional artists. Like the first season they had Billy Gibbons from ZZ Top, and they had Joe Bonamassa, who's a massive in the blues space. Anyways, and they come into a vinyl store, and they would just let them tour the vinyl store and pick up their top 5 vinyl albums of all time. But they wanted a host. So I had pitched this other idea which also could get made down the road. But they said, we want you to host Vinyl Obsession because we want there to be a host. So I welcomed them in. And this season that's coming up, October 6th, there's Sebastian Bach from Skid Row, Debbie Gibson, Jeff Timmons from 98 Degrees, Steve Vai from Frank Zappa, Mike Dirnt, bass player from Green Day, Chris Shiflett, lead guitar from Foo Fighters. Like, there's some heavy hitters. And Bobby Bones, we talked about him, Melissa Joan Hart, Dave Mustaine, Marcus King. It's like the episodes are unbelievable. And it's just me and them chilling in this record store talking about what they love about music. And then we sit down and do an interview like this for about an hour and a half, where I'm just talking about their top 5, why they chose them, what it means to them. There's all these cool through stories about their sister gave them the record, or they stole it from their sister, or their mom and dad listened to it, and that's why they still love it and have this connection. So the deep dive on that was my favorite part. But yeah, I can't wait for people to see it. You know, music is kind of universally loved and a part of everybody's life.
Yeah.
And we have country stars and rock stars, and you know, there's a wide array of different people. And the overarching thing is they're all super interesting, they're all super famous, and they've made a massive impact in the musical world. And then getting to know them and what they love about music and what their favorite albums are was really eye-opening to me.
So October 6th on Access.
Yeah, October 6th.
I think what's so cool about music is it means something different to
every single person.
Right. Like you and I could hear the same song. Maybe it doesn't mean anything to you.
Yep.
But to me, that's the song that played at my high school graduation or something like that.
Yep.
And it takes you back to a place at a time.
Yep.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it can really transport you.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's learning for me, like liking an artist and then finding out what made them get into music and what, kind of orchestrated them into that style of music, or what drew them to that kind of style of music, and why they're making the version of music that they make. It's fascinating. And the recall for something like Dave Mustaine is, he got kicked out of Metallica for being too much of a partier, and his recall and his memory for stuff and people's names and dates, it was incredible. And I mean, he's a god in the thrash metal space. And I hung out at a record store and chit-chatted with him about music for 2.5 hours. It was incredible, man. And the show, I've seen a couple of the screeners, and it's so slick and it moves well, and just got to work with a ton of super talented people. I can't wait for people to see it. It's a really cool show. Even if you don't know who these artists are, learning about it. And the truth is vinyl music is massive, right? It's overtaken in 2017. It's the #1 way people buy physical music. Obviously, digital music is #1 because it's easy and it's on everyone's phone.
Right.
But from 2017 to now, the #1 way people consume physical music is through vinyl. People collect vinyls that don't even have record players.
Yeah.
Like, it's back in the biggest way. And in every city, you can buy vinyl in Walmart. It's everywhere. And I think Access and the people that made the show, and now me, have stepped on this gold mine of content and stuff that people want to hear about and talk about, because everyone has a connection to music, like you were saying. Everyone on earth.
Yes.
If you can hear, if you have hearing, and I think even people that don't, there's a connection to it. It's been part of your life, your whole life. Whether you're a mega fan or not, music is universally loved by almost everybody that walks this planet.
So it's got to make you think, what are your top 5 vinyl?
So yeah, top 5. I think it depends. And I always say this during the show, it's an impossible thing. And
of
I think
course.
Did you catch me today? I'm in a very good mood. I'm in LA. I'm hanging out with a buddy of mine that I've known for 20 something years. We're talking about how cool I am. I mean, it's a very good day for me. So my choices today, when my dog passes away, it's going to be a very different list.
Sure.
But yeah, for me, Rage Against the Machine, self-titled Rage Against the Machine, their first album, is perfect, and you can't convince me otherwise. Actually, I'm wearing, they're not as well known as Rage Against the Machine, but this is my favorite band in the world right now, Black Pumas. Their debut was called Colors, and it's an amazing album. If you haven't listened to it, you should. They're amazing. Eric Burton is the front man of them, and I think he's the best front man to ever live. I've seen them in concert 3 times. Eric, if you see this, I love you, and I want you to move into my home. But yeah, that would be on there. Silverchair, Frog Stomp. That's like a nostalgic album. That was one of my first albums I bought as a kid with my own money. The first 3 albums I bought was Green Day, Dookie.
Me too.
Silverchair, Frog Stomp, and Weezer's Blue Album. Wow. Those are the first 3 CDs I bought with my own money from a job that I had.
My parents saw the parental advisory thing on the Dookie, and they were like, "Wait a second." I'm like, "Well, it's like 2 words. It's fine.
It's fine. I already know them."
Right.
It's mostly the Silverchair one is nostalgic, but I think it's a really good rock album. The thought of the guys from Silverchair were like 13 and 14 years old when they wrote it. And if you listen to it, you'd be like, what? There's no way people are this angry at 14. Like, it's wild. That would be on my list. It's cheating, and I think really like hardcore music people will say it's cheating, but I pick Chronicles by CCR. It's their best of. People are like, that's cheating. You can't pick a best of album. But they're such a fascinating rock and roll band. They were really only around for less than 10 years, and they have 50 like hits. Like you hear it and you're like, oh, this song. They have 50 of those, and they were really only around for 10 years, right? Just like a rocket ship like this to the top of music, and then just disappeared. Yeah. So that's definitely on my list.
I think we got one more spot.
Yeah, one more spot. I'm trying to think of the list I put. I think I would probably put Tres Hombres by ZZ Top on there. Love
what a
them.
list.
Yeah, grew up listening to them. One of my dad's favorite bands. But again, if you ask me this in 15 minutes, it might change. It might change.
Man, this was a long time coming.
Yeah.
And I want to say congrats to you on everything, both in the ring and outside of the ring. October 6th on Access, everyone can check out Vinyl Obsession. I hope that I hope there's many more seasons after this.
I hope so too, man.
Because again, everybody has a story about music.
Yep.
And even just hearing you list off those 5 albums, me and everybody watching this episode or listening is going, what are my 5? I'm going to go with one of those that Eric listed off.
Yep.
I love that.
Yep. That's the beauty of music.
So I wrap up every interview with a question about gratitude because it's such a big part of my life.
Yep.
What are 3 things, Eric, that you're grateful for right now?
Number 1, the world and the industry of pro wrestling. I'm certainly not sitting here without it. It's, I've said this before, and it's the truth. Before, other than my mom, my dad, and my sister, pro wrestling was the first thing that I loved. Really loved, truly loved, and was obsessed. Like, probably unhealthy, really, if I'm being completely honest. Pro wrestling and the world of pro wrestling, my friends, my family, my wife, people that are close to me, like without them, there is nothing, right? There's just nothing. And I would think opportunity is, I can't single out one, but living life with opportunity, being able to live in Canada and live in the United States, and we talked about this in the car ride over, is like the American dream is still a real thing. I'm living proof, right? I'm a short, chubby nerd from Canada in a tiny town of 70 people, and I've wrestled all over the world, entertained millions of people. I have a very unbelievably amazing life because of opportunities that have been given to me. A lot of them that I've earned, but I was willing to walk through those doors when they presented themselves. So those 3 things: pro wrestling, friends and family. That would probably be number 1. Yeah. And number 3 is opportunity, because it's a beautiful thing, man. Opportunity is everything.
And I love the idea of, if this thing doesn't happen, then this thing doesn't happen. If you don't say yes to this, then this thing down the line can't happen.
Yep.
And you're living, breathing proof of that.
100%. It can be done. Yes. We're both there.
We are.
Yeah, we both are.
Look at us.
Yeah, look at us.
Look at us. Eric, so good to see you, man.
Yeah, cheers, man. Thank you.
Thank you.